I declare open the 35th anniversary of the Religious Summit meeting on Mount Hiei, the interreligious gathering of prayer for world peace. Ladies and gentlemen convening in this hall, and those watching YouTube live transmission, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to your participation today. Looking around us now, I see tough international situation, such as ever-expanding COVID-19 pandemic, ongoing war, and many other issues. At the Religious Summit this year, we discussed those issues around us, mainly focusing on the issue of climate change, on the basis of prayers and the dialogue as a starting point of our effort. What kind of duties we religious leaders have to perform? Our historical effort to build a peace should be passed on to the future together with you. Sorry to introduce me late. I am Zenshu Wada. I serve as the Master of Opening Ceremony. I am Executive Committee member of the 35th anniversary of the Religious Summit meeting on Mount Hiei, Secretary of General Affairs, Japan Buddhist Federation. Very nice to see you all. I am Chizuko Nakamura. I serve as an assistant today. Very nice to meet you. Let me first introduce the participants on the stage. They're the representatives of the Executive Committee of the 35th anniversary of the Religious Summit meeting on Mount Hiei, distinguished guests, and invited guests from overseas. The most venerable Kokei Oki, honorary advisor, Executive Committee of the 35th anniversary of the Religious Summit meeting on Mount Hiei, Supreme Priest, the Tendai Buddhist denomination. Reverend Fumio Shishino, honorary advisor, Executive Committee, Chairperson of the Board, Japanese Association of Religious Organization, President Shinto Fusokyo. His Excellency, Archbishop, Most Reverend Monsignor Leo Boccalli, Apostolic Nuncio to Japan. Reverend James Bagwan, General Secretary, Pacific Conference of Churches. Reverend Kiyoshi Tsuchiya, Honorary Advisor, Executive Committee Chairman, Japan Confederation of Christian Churches, General Superintendent, Japan Assemblies of God. Reverend Kurenai Deguchi, Advisor, Executive Committee, Spiritual Leader, Omoto. Professor Desmond Cahill, Moderator, Asian Conference of Religions for Peace. Professor Agostino Giovagnoli, Head, Asia Division Department, Community of San Eligio. Reverend Munemichi Kurozumi, Advisor, Executive Committee, Chief Patriarch Kurozumi Kyo. Reverend Koi Sato, Advisor, Executive Committee, Chairperson of the Board, Japan Buddhist Federation. Venerable Shuko Ishizuki, Advisor, Executive Committee, Head Priest Soto Shu. Reverend Tsunekyo Tanaka, Advisor, Executive Committee, President, Association of Shinto Shrines. Reverend Toshikazu Ishikura, Advisor, Executive Committee, Chairperson, Board of Directors, Federation of New Religious Organizations of Japan, President Daie Kai. Venerable Keishi Miyamoto, Advisor, Executive Committee, Leader, Myochi Kai. Reverend Toshio Endo, Advisor, Executive Committee, President, Japan Muslim Association. Reverend Makoto Uematsu, Advisor, Executive Committee Chairperson, World Conference of Religions for Peace, Japan. Reverend Yoshinao Otsuka, Executive Committee Meeting, Bishop, Catholic Church Diocese. Reverend Ryochi Gojo, Vice President, Japan Buddhist Federation. Reverend Masakazu Kanaoka, Association of Shinto Shrine. Reverend Yasuhiro Tanaka, Chief Priest, Kamowake Ikazuchi Jinja Shrine. Reverend Naoki Mabuchi, Chief Priest, Hiyoshi Taisha. Venerable Shoko Abe, Chairman, Executive Committee, President, the Tendai Buddhist Denomination. Reverend Keiji Kunitomi, Vice Chairman, Executive Committee, Chair, Rissho Kosei Kai.
Now, at the opening of the ceremony, Venerable Shoko Abe, Chairman of Executive Committee and President of the Tendai Buddhist Denomination, will deliver a greeting. Reverend Abe, please. With the blessings of the Supreme Beings and efforts of all related parties, the Interreligious Gathering of Prayer for World Peace commemorating the 35th anniversary of the Religious Summit meeting on Mount Hiei is being held. As the President of the Executive Committee, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude. Since we began to pray and hold dialogues with you in quest for lasting world peace, 35 years have passed already. Since the first meeting on Mount Hiei was held in 1987, we have inherited its spirit and have organized the Japan Conference of Religious Representatives every 10 years, and the commemorative meetings by the Executive Committee every 5 years. Literally speaking, Japan's religious leaders have combined their efforts to hold them. Joined with many religious leaders from around the world, we have held lively discussions and offered sincere prayers for peace, transcending the differences in our faiths, and delivered common messages to the world. At the 30th anniversary, we announced this message to the world. We resolved to build strong connections with civic society in order to realize a society without discrimination or injustice. As people of faith, we must be aware of this responsibility. The past 5 years, however, have seen an incessant cycle of hatred and revenge, along with the spread of wars and terrorist attacks. In addition, the new challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic engulfs the world, forcing us to battle against an invisible enemy. It raises new issues and fragmentations, forcing us to grope around in utter darkness day after day. We pledged to warn against worsening global warming and environmental destruction, and to urge every person to recognize it and take appropriate actions. Unfortunately, however, we see repeated abnormal weather conditions and natural disasters and face threats of the nature in increasing frequency. It is not an exaggeration to say that our planet is on the verge of a crisis. These are the results of insatiable human desires, and we should take it as a warning from our supreme beings. We must humbly recognize this fact. Under the theme of climate change and duties of religious leaders, we will have a commemorative lecture and a symposium today. Let us take these events as an opportunity to seek for the solutions to these challenges. As religious leaders, let us take initiatives and actions and display our achievements to the world. We, the people of faith, have deepened our mutual understanding through discussions and prayed together to seek for lasting world peace. And let us recall our pledge from the first meeting. Religious people have to make a preferred option for the poor and offer prayers for the world peace for all the human beings. I'd like to conclude my greetings by expressing my heartfelt appreciation to all parties who have worked together for this meeting on Mount Hiei. August 4th, 2022, the Chairman of the Executive Committee of the Interreligious Gathering of Prayer for World Peace, Shoko Abe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman Abe. Next, the peace message from overseas will be presented. The peace message from His Holiness Pope Francis will be read by His Excellency Archbishop Monsignor Leo Bocaldi, Apostolic Nuncio to Japan. And then His Excellency Monsignor Leo Bocaldi, would you please?
To the Venerable Shoko Abe, President of the Tendai Buddhist denomination. As the 35th gathering of prayer for world peace on Mount Hiei take place this day, I, on behalf of His Holiness Pope Francis, am pleased to greet you and all the distinguished representatives of various religious traditions participating in the event most warmly. I join all of you in praying for efficient and concrete steps by religious leaders concerning climate change. I am grateful to His Excellency Monsignor Leo Boccardi, the Apostolic Nuncio in Japan, who is reading out this message in my absence. Your participation in this summit clearly shows your commitment to promoting the spirit of Assisi, which has been reverberating since the time religious leaders from across the world gathered together in Assisi to pray for world peace. Inspired by that noble and historic initiative by Pope St. John Paul II, the tradition you have created in these past 35 years has reiterated the duty of religious leaders to come together to identify and to address issues of common concern. In today's meeting, as you reflect on climate change and the duties of religious leaders, we are called upon to renew and to reinforce the awareness that all are members of one human family, housed in a common home which is being threatened by the ill effects of climate change. Our religious beliefs and spiritual traditions, though may be different from one another, provide resources for creating and nurturing a culture of care and responsibility. Inspired and driven by them, we can, together, offer effective responses to the unprecedented ecological crisis and the crisis of values that we are presently experiencing, and in this way to offer concrete hope to future generations. The current ecological crisis, as Pope Francis reminds us, is a consequence of a crisis of values, resulting from unbridled greed of some and unhealthy models of development adopted which are not in tune with the covenant that ought to exist between human beings and the environment. The models and worldviews prompted by religious traditions, however, have the potential to encourage ecological conversion and to deter the seeds of conflicts that have led to the current ecological crisis. For they look at history with a long-term vision and are motivated by transcendent goals. In this respect, religious leaders have a greater responsibility of promoting the rich heritage of their spiritualities so as to nurture authentic human development, to form societies of individuals capable of deep enjoyment while remaining free of the obsession of the greed of consumerism, and to cultivate attitudes which together foster a spirit of generous care full of tenderness. I wish to conclude by saying that care for the environment grows in proportion to our care for the human person. A return to more just and sustainable structures and processes of environmental renewal will uplift the human person. Every effort to protect and improve our world entails profound changes in lifestyles, models of production and consumption, and the established structures of power which today govern societies. Evidently, authentic human development has a moral character. It presumes full respect for the human person, but it must also be concerned about the world around us. With renewed promise of prayers, I invoke on abundance of divine blessing upon all of you. Miguel Ángel Cardinal Ayuso Guixot, Prefect, on behalf of Pope Francis. Thank you.
Leo Boccardi 大司教様。
His Excellency, thank you very much for introducing the message of Pope. And then this peace message will be handed over to Venerable Shoko Abe, Chairman of the Executive Committee. Thank you very much indeed, His Excellency, Monsignor Leo Boccardi and the Chairman Abe. Would you please return to your seats? Well, with this, now the opening ceremony of the 35th anniversary of the Religious Summit meeting on Mount Hiei, the Interreligious Gathering of Prayer for World Peace, is over. I thank you very much for your cooperation.
では皆様はご講談いただき、自席へお戻りください。
The honorable guest, ladies and gentlemen, would you please go back to the floor and guide it back to your seat? And the memorial lecture by Mr. Jitsuo Terashima will be commencing shortly. Thank you.
皆様へご案内申し上げます。
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to start the memorial lecture. So, would you please return to your seat? Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to start the memorial lecture by Professor Jitsuro Terashima, Chairman, Japan Research Institute and President of Tama University. His title is Religion in Great Historical Turning Point, Seeking the Resilience of the Heart. Professor Terashima, please. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am not a religious person or religious scholar. I am a sort of a secularized person living in a business world for about 40 years. And now I have a bridge towards the academia, international economics and so forth are to be studied by me in academic circle. But today, I am invited to speak here in a very honorary podium, and it is really presumptuous of me to speak about the issue like the resilience of the mind, because all you are experts, but I would like to just deliver what I feel about that. So I have been living in the business world, and I visited over 100 countries, especially in Middle East countries. There is a monotheism that the Muslim, Judaism, Christianity, well, Middle East is a kind of a center of world religion. The religion supports the people living there. So I visited that sacred a country like Israel, Saudi Arabia, and furthermore, in India, I visited the sacred site of Buddhism. Also, I've lived in the United States over 10 years, and also I lived in London, UK, and on every Sunday I see that people going to the church on Sunday, and their passion to religion was so strong. And I, as a business person, lived through the age without religion after the World War II. I was so surprised and amazed with the passion and sort of a heat of the religion of the world, the countries except Japan, and the religion really moves the world. And so over 20 years, I've been thinking about the religion and the Japanese, and I have published the religion and the Japanese, but today I felt the deep soul of Mount Hiei. So Mount Hiei should be called a kind of a mother of Japanese religion. And here in the very sacred site, it is a great honor for me to communicate to you what I feel about the religion, or I am grateful if I can provide any clue to consider the issue of the globe and the environment and the human being. One human family was mentioned about the previous speaker. We, as a humankind, is living in one family of mankind. That is the bottom line of our thinking. And let me get into the substance of my discussion. I have 4 panels. And I would like to speak by seeing one of the panel and think about this. And I myself, well, the people who are living in the 21st century, what kind of a situation are we in? That is about the basic understanding. The chimpanzee and the artificial intelligence and the human of the Da Vinci drawing is in the center. Actually, from the animal, from the artificial intelligence, we've been asked, what is a human being? I think we are asked to answer that question. And so first, let me answer the question from the chimpanzee. Well, the development of the science and technology in the 21st century is so rapid. I am in the social science sphere, but from the natural science, the life science progress, and also the animal behavior study has developed, and I'm so interested in reading those papers. And I've been so amazed by reading that. In 2003, the human genome has been led all through. The DNA analysis of human has been completed in 2003. And the difference of DNA of a chimpanzee and human is just 1.2%. Except the individual difference, just 1.06% is the right answer, people says. And we human beings think that we are better than the monkey. We are cleverer than chimpanzee. Don't we? But it is not the right answer. When we look at the individual capability of each living creature, there are excellent living creatures having the higher mental capacity than men. We are living in the late modern period. So this is a kind of anthropocentric area. That sounds good, isn't it? But in a way, we have an illusion that we human beings are superior to any other creatures on globe. So the difference of the DNA of 1.2%, what is the meaning of this? Well, the recent study revealed the communication language and the difference of the mind or the awareness. Where we say yabai in Japan, that means the danger or risk. So we are dangerous species because the difference of the religion, thought, and the ideology that just very easily motivates us to kill the fellow human being. That is only human who kill the same species so easily. But the animal behavior study by the Professor Yamagiwa, the former president of Kyoto University, researched on the behavior of the monkeys. But what is the fundamental difference of the behavior of man and the animal? Well, the most eminent difference is that we human has a sympathy to what we see in front of us. So the animal who has that sympathy, that capability amongst all the animals, that is the most striking characteristic of the man. And yes, in my career, I felt that is exactly true. But on the other hand, when we look at the progress of artificial intelligence, I am sure that all of you are feeling the progress is kind of outstanding. And the singularity discussion is just around the corner. So the computer, what means the artificial intelligence, is going to go beyond the human capability. It was said to be 2045, but recent research revealed that would be 10 years in advance. it would be advanced by 10 years. So the difference between AI and man, when AI is superseding human capability, what does it mean? Why? Because it is deeply related with the meaning of religion. Well, our mind changes, our spirit changes, and when thinking of that, the recognition and knowledge, which is on the slide, we'd like to understand that the recognition, that is a capability of recognize and understand, and the awareness is a consciousness. So what is the difference between the two? The recognition, understanding means that through studying, learning, we memorize things, and on the basis of that judgment, there is the kind of the logical or kind of reasonable reasoning to select one decision. That mental capability is understanding or recognition. And when we compete in that recognition or understanding things with the AI or computer, I think we will be losing to them very soon. For example, remember the Ego or Shogi game? Through the method of deep learning, so the millions of the gaming step is memorized by AI. And it would supersede the human player very easily. In terms of the mental capability of understanding and recognition, the computer AI will supersede us during the time we are still living. But when we have to deep dive into the meaning of understanding or recognition, I think the consciousness is very important in the human intellectual capability. There are many AI experts writing about that capability. One Italian AI expert explained with very big power of persuasion to me, and I just would like to tell about that. 1969, for the first time, man stood on the moon. Astronaut Armstrong and one more astronaut landed on moon. And beyond that spaceship, there is a famous photo called Earthrise. Famous Earthrise. This is not a sunrise, but the Earthrise. It's not the sun or moon is rising, but the Earth is rising beyond the dark space of the universe. So two astronauts had looked back how Earth has risen. There is a sensor to deepen our viewing, how the sun is moving, how the Earth is moving. The ability of the sensor is to enhance the recognition, enhance our understanding. However, over the surface of the moon and the sea, Earth has risen. Two astronauts documented that they look at each other face. They look at the Earth and shedding tears. They cried. Computer never cries. So our parents, children, sweethearts, friends, remembering all those dearest people on moon and looking back to them on Earth, they naturally cried. That proves the power of the consciousness, awareness. So it is the consciousness, not for the self, not for the purpose of thinking the purpose in a logical and a reasonable way. Even though the AI and the computer has progressed very much, they are not able to possess that mental capacity. When we consider the purpose objectively and calmly, we just make a reasoning for that. For example, when there is a kind of drowning children on river, you would jump into the river, although you know you are not able to swim. For the sake of sweetheart, for the sake of your dear child, you would act without any calculation at all, without the prospect that you are able to save them. That mind works is beyond the calculation or beyond a kinds of easy decision making. That makes a man a man. Now, we are living in a 21st century, and we are living in the society AI is advanced, and our job would be changed by them. But how deep our mental capability is, you would see how it is well connected. The religion is not the power of recognizing. The religion is giving us the power of consciousness. The great religious leaders of the world, well, although you may not know him, but they are very kind of a good person in local area in each area of the world I visited. And I was so astonished how deep their consciousness and how broad their mind was. I was amazed by that many times. And then now I would like to move on.
Let us think a little deeper about religion and would like to introduce the second panel. The source of religion in the history of humankind, the advancement of life science, cultural anthropology, and cognitive science you may be interested in. This is something that you have to pay attention to. This is the theme that what is a religion for human being? We have to think about it. Now, this can be, you may say that this can be one opinion, but this is being evidenced scientifically, but our ancestor Homo sapiens emerged in the African continent about 200,000 years ago. And as you have heard, great journey. I mean, they have moved from the continent of Africa to Eurasian continent about 60,000 years ago. This is like Exodus from Africa. Why did they move? I mean, there are many opinions discussed today, which are all intuitive. But one of them is the epidemic theory. I mean, in those days, there was an epidemic or pandemic, so they moved out from Africa, or like they moved out to look for the jobs, or maybe climate change urged them to move to Eurasian continent. This will be further studied, but in the Japanese archipelago, about 38,000 years ago, Homo sapiens arrived at in the Japanese archipelago. Now, here, from this point, this starts to be related to the religion. About 10,000 years ago, there was a revolution for settlement. And before this point in time, a human being hunted without settlement. But 10,000 years ago, people started to settle in one location and started a recycle family engaged in agriculture. They have changed their lifestyles about 10,000 years ago, and people are studying about this. They started to be rooted in the motherland. As for the agricultural reform in renovation, there are many books published about it. The meaning of settlement, I mean, people have to live together with other people, even though you may like them. And because before that point in time, if you were in trouble, you can move to another place, like migratory birds. But now, people start to live together in one community, in one place. You may not like other people, but you have to live with such people. In living together, like you gain the wisdom to live, like not only yourself, but you're not living alone. You have to live with others. You have to live adapting to the environment. You have to accept the practices. You have to care other people. And these are needed for you to live in a community. Like about 10,000 years ago, there was a revolution for settlement like this. And recently, many books are published about the study of this topic. About 7,000 years ago, the people start to be aware of conceptual supreme being or God. About 3,000 years ago, up until 3,000 years ago, and people were more sensitive than the human being of today. Now, people were aware of the God or supreme being and lived in dialogue with the God. In other words, they accepted the advice and suggestions of the faith and religious leaders and always thought how to contact with the God and how people should live according to the teaching of the supreme being. But about 3,000 years ago, people start to see the birth of the consciousness as human being. And about 2,500 years ago, like now, we are discussing in the category of the world religion. What is it? It's like ethnicity, beyond the ethnicity and the national borders, religion, some religions spread around the world, deeply rooted in the consciousness of people. So about 2,005 years ago, such world religion came into birth. In many of them at the same timing, like the Jews, which is the starting of the monotheism in the Middle East. About 2,000 or 500 years ago, the 5 books of Moses were put together. And about 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ emerged in the Jewish religions. And India subcontinent, Buddha, like Shakson, from whom Japanese receive influence the most. Shakson lived between BC 463 to 343, about 2,500 years ago. And Confucianism may not be the world religion, but Confucius, the founder of Confucianism, had a birth, was born in about 2,500 years ago. What happened in 2,500 years ago? This is a big theme that we have to think. Now, why in many parts of the world the world religion were established and had an origin? This study is being made with much attention by people. Another mysterious story is that the peak of Greek civilization was in Athens at this timing. So the timing between the Athens peak golden times and the birth of the world religions are the same timing. So in the world of consciousness of human beings start to move with a big surge at this timing. As the bottom line writes, the rise of a human consciousness and as the religion as the result of it. Now, the religion beyond all kinds of religions, the true religion, if I may use this word, is the power to reflect upon yourself. Like the Buddhism of Buddha is the ultimate power for inflection. And he faced with the troubles and the mental weakness that he had. So the consciousness and the mind of religion start to rise silently with the people's power to reflect upon and inflection and empathy. And also, the consciousness in religions is that the supreme being is watching you in living modesty. Like a supreme being, something bigger than you. It can be God or it can be Buddha. Is watching you. So people start to have a consciousness and be aware of being modest, recognizing the supreme one. And this is the value common to all religions and the religious people. 2,500 years ago, in a very calm manner, the world religions had an origin, and I'm thinking of finding the commonalities between them, like love in Christianity or the mercy in Buddhism. Ultimately, in the human mind, the altruism, like instead of focusing on I, my, me, and thinking just about you, the altruistic mind, thinking about others, and the care about others. And so people start to have such a mentality and gave the origin of the religions in the history of human being, history of religion. And I'm going to show the third panel. The world religion, in its history, experienced the uplift and evolution. Now, the people who are not religious leaders, as myself, is discussing the religion from the social, the environmental sphere. Now, how I think about Christianity, I've visited the Golgotha Hills twice and followed the path that Jews followed, carrying the cross twice. And I stood up on the hill in the Saint Church of the Tomb. There is a word that Christianity was founded with Saint Paulo. The death, this holy death of Jews, support the Christianity without doubt, but actually, Paulo, who have never met him, started the Christianity. The role of Paulo is quite vital in forming the Christianity of today, and he triggered the transformation or the change point, or paradigm point. Now, the Paulo asked that is God only for Jews? Well, it's not. I mean, transcending the ethnicity, transcending the gender and the classes, and gods are for all the human beings. With this concept is something that started this paradigm shift of Christianity. So this was the birth of a universal God proposed by Paulo. In other words, Christianity, upon the person who led the life of Christianity, were emphasized by Paulo, who made the paradigm shift and made it to the world religion. And in addition, the Protestant originated against the Roman Catholic Church. Now, opposing the Roman Catholic Church, Saint Xavier came to Japan, showing the sense of crisis of a Catholic Church. In other words, the religious revolution were happening in Europe, and the Catholic Church were under tension and had a hope to pursue globalization and capitalizing on the Great Voyage era, and arrived at Japan. I mean, there are reasons for all the happenings in the history. Now, the modern history where we live. Now, the 1648 is the Westphalia Compact, which is all familiar to everyone who study in the social studies, and this shows the end of the 30-year war and liberated policy from the religious authority and moved history from the medieval to the modern era.
And then sovereign states were born. Since then, the democracy and the capitalism, well, those things that we are now relying on. All this economic system, the political system emerged in the wave of modernizations, and that's the environment that human beings have lived through. From the Western society, the religion evolution started as a leverage modern times opened its door. So that's I feel very deeply looking at the literature. Now, on Buddhism, as I said earlier, the Buddha's Buddhism, as I referred to earlier, when you see the literature, more literature, when it comes to Genesis, Jackson did not really try to find Buddhism to save people, but this is the form of ultimate introspectiveness, to look at people's sufferings sincerely until he reaches conviction. So Buddhism is quite introspective. The minds are going inward, introvert. And his disciples, in the context of the time, at that time, added the value onto the Buddha's Buddhism, and it created the major Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism. Well, when it comes to human being and religion, I'm a layman in religion, but seriously, in the field, I try to look at religion since the advent of Buddhism onto Japan. Well, it may sound granted for you. There is a famous monk in India, in Sessing. And when you understand the Buddhism in Chinese character, means sutra, like Kumaraju, he was a great person who manifests Buddhism in Chinese character, Sanjo Genzo, and he played a very important role by visiting India to cause profound understanding. So there is a series of addition of values onto the original Buddha's Buddhism, and the Buddhism goes evolution. And creativity, as written here, can be observed in Japanese Buddhism. And Saicho, founder of Tendai denomination, people say Saicho and Kukai. And at the same period, they went to China as a mission from Japan. The monk Saicho has a very broad-minded person. Kukai was younger than Saicho, but Saicho asked Kukai, he bowed to Kukai, asking Kukai to teach him what Kukai learned from China, the mountain of motherhood, with the altitude of 848 meters. Mount Hiei is the mother of the motherhood mountain, whether it be Dogen and Eisai, Nichiren. And around this Mount Hiei, they actually went through a very severe introspective training, trying to conviction. In the words of Saicho, at the top of Mount Hiei, there's a what shines the one corner of the place is the treasure of the nation. To develop some person from your chest who will grow much bigger than yourself. So that's what he thought. So it's the same may apply to the company setting, private company. You have to really develop good people to be the successor to the top management. Well, when I teach Kukai at the summer school, I think Kukai is more of the scientific-minded person, engineer. Not only the single esotericism, the medicine, pharmacology, civil engineering, all of these, the knowledge of these area, the engineering technology was brought back to Japan by Kukai. Here and there in Japan, you see the traces of Kukai's experience, Kukai's knowledge embedded in the Japanese society. The Kukai is very good at building logic perfectly. It's quite moving when you read it. I guess so, and Saicho's broadness of his mind. Kukai is an excellent Buddhist, but I'm quite thrilled by the broad-mindedness of Saicho. I said the same thing in Mount Koya. The people were rather surprised to hear me saying that. Honen Shinran, other great priests, they change the Buddhism to the religion for the regular ordinary person. And as a national religion for the states, Buddhism actually was born and spread over. But the Honen Shinran were actually contributing to the spread of Buddhism into the regular people. And they face with the Kamakura shogunate in terms of what the future of Japan would be. So Japan's Buddhism in Japanese Buddhism, all these people actually gave the additional sparkling to the Buddhism. And lastly, I would like to reconfirm the great potential and somewhat fear the religions have. Actually, religions are both a sword. In the world of religion, we already know what's happening. Russian religion. This is when the ethnic religions shook hands in hand with the national state religion, that would made the justifications of the war possible to oppress the people with the military power. Those power those people who ever opposed to the state could be actually oppressed by this combination under the name of religions, the deprivation of the weaker, the mind control. All these phenomena are quite disappointing, and in this situation we see a scene in various dire situations. Meanwhile, the religions have the foundation of the dialogue and its potential is another one, to draw the people's sympathy and compassion. Or you put your feet on the other shoes and to feel the same with the other people. A dialogue, cooperation, harmony actually constitute the basis of religion. I think the religion, is a culmination of cultural power. You open your horizon in thought, and you face with a person who tried to oppose to you. By so doing, you just expand your vision, horizon of vision. So you go one step forward into the other's mind to draw sympathy and to deepen the consciousness. This is the role played by the religious people, and actually religions are playing this role. Well, I expect that you'll have a very active discussions on the climate change. In the great universe, what will be the order, what will be the rule, all these questions and minds in quest of those questions are born from religions. I started to be interested in religion by something said by Daisei Suzuki. You will find outside world very broad and very deep inside your mind. Including your mind, your inner part is very depth. So you see the very broad outside world and the depth in mind. This is, in English, integrity, the wisdom of the whole. So you don't really bound by the very narrow value system or your area of expertise, but we have to really think about the wisdom of the whole, or integrity, what we call. So I only spoke for 40 minutes, so my speech might sound a random talk, but I just wanted to feed for the thought. I thank you very much.
寺島先生、ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much, Professor Terashima. Please give him big hands. With this, we'd like to close the memorial lecture. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Now, we'd like to take about a 5 minutes break. After the break, the symposium will start when the preparation is over, so I hope you will stay in the hall. Thank you.
皆様へご案内申し上げます。まもなくシンポジウムを始めてまいりますので、お席へお戻りいただきますようお願い申し上げます。皆様へご案内申し上げます。まもなくシンポジウムを始めてまいりますので、お席へお戻りいただきますようお願い申し上げます。
はい、わかりました。
皆様、
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for waiting. We would now like to start Symposium with the theme of climate change and duties of religious leaders. The coordinator for Symposium today is Reverend Megumi Wada, Executive Committee Member and Director General Affairs Department of Rissho Koseikai. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for your introduction. I am Megumi Wada, an executive committee member. Now, Mr. Terashima, Professor Terashima earlier talked about the human beings, religion, and religious leaders from a very wide perspective, touching upon the history of human beings. He emphasized the importance of having the wide perspective, introducing his book. He advised us the very fundamental part. And he said that religion and human beings are a threatful existence, but at the same time, we have a wisdom to learn from each other. Now, in this symposium, we would like to discuss about the climate change and the duties of religious leaders with the panelists who have a faith in different religions. Let me first introduce 4 panelists in the order of their presentations. And please refer to the program at your hand for their detailed profiles. First, Reverend Minoru Sonoda. He is the chief priest of Chichibu Jinja in Saitama Prefecture and serving for 30 years, and is an expert in the religious studies, especially the Japanese religious history. In the Shaso Gakkai and WCRP, he has been working on forestation and other environmental issues. Second is Reverend James Bhagwan. He is from Fiji, one of the Pacific Islands, which are in a crisis due to the rise of sea level resulting from the climate change. Reverend Bhagwan is the clergy of the Methodist Church and serves the General Secretary of the Pacific Conference of Churches, which 18 Pacific Island states and territories are the members. Over 20 years, he has been engaged in the climate change issue. Third is Professor Makio Takemura. He specializes in the Buddhist studies and religious philosophy and is the Professor Emeritus of Toyo University. He was the president of Toyo University until 2 years ago. Currently, he is the director at Peace Research Institute of Religions for Peace Japan, WCRP, and promotes dialogues with scholars in various religions. And he has published a book called Buddhist Ecology, Connecting Buddhism and Environment. The fourth is Professor Desmond Cahill. He became the moderator of the Asian Conference of Religions for Peace, ACRP, last year and leads the interreligious dialogues. He specializes in the urban and social studies and is Professor Emeritus of RMIT University in Melbourne. And now, we would like to hear presentations from the panelists. First is Reverend Sonoda, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, I was given to speak at this panel symposium, and it is a very great opportunity to speak about the climate change and the duties of religious leaders. I think I'm not able to answer directly to this profound question, but I rather would like to speak about in this age of difficulty is the religion be of any role at all to help solving the problem. And I have to speak about the identity of religion itself in this modern age. So time is limited. I just would like to read my text. First of all, I would like to speak about the confused view of life and environmental destruction. Eric Fromm, the American thinker, once stated, in the 19th century, God is dead. In the 20th century, man is dead. This means that in modern period, people lost their trust in religion, and this in turn made religions incapable of resolving various problems of humankind. In the 21st century, however, it is absolutely necessary to let people live again and let God live for the end, because the most fundamental cause common to all serious problems confronting us in the contemporary world is a loss of a spiritual view of life. This view of life is rooted in human existence and is therefore derived from the religious nature unique to human being. According to modern secularized anthropocentrism, only the people living now have the right to live, and their lives should be respected unconditionally. This belief has created a trend that encourages individuals not to hesitate to prolong their lives by any means. People upholding this belief behave as though their lives belong only to themselves and take it for granted that they have an inherent right to live by their own will, undisturbed by the bonds of the parents and other relatives. These people believe that in order to survive, they can freely use not only the lives of other creatures, but also the organs and the body parts of unborn babies and the brain-dead person. In particular, advanced medical and bioscience have been developed based on such a narrow view that prioritizes respect for human lives. In other words, in the 19th century, modern period killed God to make themselves God. But this resulted in the killing of people or the loss of their original human nature. Moreover, as a result of the rapid progress of science and technology in the 20th century, materialistic civilization has developed, characterized by the excessive consumption of fossil fuel. This in turn has led to the serious challenge of the climate change and the destruction of the global environment. And the destruction of the global environment means nothing less than the collapse of global ecosystem, which endangers the very survival of humankind. The advanced science we see today has revealed that humankind appeared about 2 million years ago, and the result of the various revolutionary processes that took place about 4 billion years after the emergence of the first primitive organism in the Earth. It is also revealed that we humans inherit the genes from the first primitive organism and that we share our lives in a chain of life with all living things on the planet, including animals, plants, and even microorganisms. Science findings have shown that the Earth is a great ecosystem where countless living things live together, maintaining the delicate balance with sun, water, and air. In short, the Earth is a living planet or Gaia. Currently, however, this invaluable Gaia is suffering from the impacts of the materialistic civilization created by humans who dominate this living planet, and its entire ecosystem is on the verge of crisis. This in turn threatens the very survival of humankind. In this way, greatest challenge for humankind in the 21st century is to correct the course of this destructive materialistic civilization and to restore a life-oriented civilization that ensures all living things on the planet can live in harmony, while concurrently enabling mankind to enjoy healthy, wholesome lives. In this context, it is important to note that although humankind comprises only a tiny fraction of ecosystem on Earth, It is a religious culture of human that has discovered profound and mysterious phenomena of living things and recognized them as invaluable lives. Sir Edward B. Tyler, a British anthropologist, for example, states in his book Primitive Culture that the first religion, which he called animism, developed among the primitive people when they understood the presence of the soul in living people based on their experience of their dream and the death of other community members. Leaving aside the validity of his view with regard to the origin of the religion, I believe that all religions in the world harbor such a spiritual view of life in their deepest part. Throughout human history, from the primitive era to the present day, people have become aware of the fact that they are alive through self-transcendent experiences. It is that moment of this awareness, I believe, that the people begin to conceive a fundamental question common to all religions. When humans initially recognized the fact that they are alive, they discovered that they are spiritual entities, and this discovery made people aware of the mystery and the paradox of their lives, leading them to ask questions about life as a subjective and existential entity. Why was I born? Why am I alive? And why should I die? The life in this context differs from the objective biological phenomena we regard as life today. Instead of the objective life of the third person, his, her life, or their lives, it is a subjective life of the first and second person, my, your life, or our lives. On the other hand, contemporary medical science and bioscience are simply concerned with the biological life, virtually ignoring the spiritual or mental working of a living entity. Since mankind reached the awareness of spiritual life during the early days of human history and developed its culture, based on this recognition, questions related to life has been and will remain existential problem for people, rather than mere questions of bioscience. In other words, whereas all species on Earth strive to fulfill their lives on the individual basis and to produce offspring, human beings are destined to have a deeper awareness of their individual lives and death, and to forever continue to inquire about the meaning and value of their life and death, so that they can better fulfill their life. Since advanced modern science has clarified the fact that humankind is but a part of the ecosystem of the planet, it has become important to believe that only humankind is granted by God the privilege of surviving on Earth. If we deeply consider the true reality that all living things have invaluable spiritual lives and that they support each other by striving to sustain their own lives while allowing others to live, I believe we realize the true value of the lives of others as well as our own lives. Moreover, we will be thankful for the life given to us and become aware of the mystery how life works that transcends human knowledge. As I have so discussed, human beings differ from other life if that we are aware of the mortality, as it's called by the Vernon. Man can conceive of his own death. It is only human that are aware of the fundamental contradiction involved in their very existence. That means to live means to die. Moreover, we are aware of the fact that we have to kill many other species in order to gain food and sustain our own lives. This fact explains why people need to resort to religious or other transcendent means in order to be truly human, a fact that underlies the development of human spiritual culture. Norman Brown, an American classical scholar with unique way of thinking, referred to the fundamental tenets of Jainism in India, which forbids all acts of killing of living things, and states there is no way to avoid murder except by ritual murder. He so stated, I myself also believe that all religions have developed based on the sincere searches for solutions to relieve people from fundamental sense of sin and anxiety, which are, regardless of their form, intrinsically associated with their lives. This, I believe, explains why various religions of the world have a wide variety of mythological traditions and symbolic rituals, particularly various forms of symbolic redemption that involves sacrifice of some sort. In Japan's Shinto tradition, we venerate our ancestors and spirit of nature, who we believe have granted us our soul and who allow us to sustain our lives, regarding them as divine spirits of individual lives and observing services for them. We pray for the harmonious coexistence and the mutual prosperity of these deities and human beings. We believe that our lives were given by the deities and ancestors through our parents, and that through the death we pass on the lives to our descendants and to nature. After fulfilling our lives, we become ancestral spirit through the death, and our descendant will in turn offer service to us. This is a belief that the mysterious world, where spiritual life is shared by all people and all other living things, allowing people to sustain their lives. In Japan's Buddhism tradition, the poetic verse, all living things possess the Buddha nature. And those are appearing in various literature from the ancient period. In addition, phrases such as glass, tree, land, attain Buddhahood, and the plant tree. The Buddhahood has been frequently cited in No songs, traditional narrative in addition to the Buddhist text. As indicated in those phrases, Japanese Buddhism recognizes the spiritual nature of life, which they call Buddha nature, not only sentient being, but also non-sentient beings such as trees and pebbles. Materialistic civilization dominated by the 20th century. In the 21st century, we should collect the course that we took the previous century and step forward to create life-oriented civilization. And we have to consider to bring about both spiritual and material affluence for many people. In this context, I believe that the spiritual view of life that has been fostered by Japan's spiritual tradition, including Shintoism and Buddhism. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
園田先生、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Professor Sonoda. So the materialistic civilization is bringing about to the serious destruction of the ecosystem. So the evil of the modern person has been clearly stated and show the direction as a life-oriented civilization, as a spiritual and a proactive life that is continuing beyond the access of that time.
先生よりご発表。
Then can I invite Reverend Bhagwan, James Bhagwan, please?
You put your headphones on. My sincere gratitude to our moderator this morning and to our translators who are doing important work also. Honorable and esteemed religious leaders, dear sisters and brothers, fellow panelists. In our Pacific way, I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of where we gather today, part of the sacred creation. And I pay my respects to the people whose identity is intertwined with land and sea, and give our love and share peace with elders, mothers, fathers, and children, past, present, and future. We pray for grace, peace, truth, joy, life, and well-being, the peace of God upon the land, upon the ocean, and all who call it home, and all who will walk and sail lightly upon her. I greet you with Fijian words, Bula Vinaka. Bula means life or health. It means well-being. Vinaka means thankfulness. More particularly, it means abundance. So when I greet you with the words Bula Vinaka, our traditional Fijian greeting, I am saying to you, may you have an abundance of well-being. My sincere appreciation to the Tendai Buddhist community for this opportunity to participate and speak at this 35th anniversary of the Religious Summit meeting. And I am here not as a leader, but as a servant of Pacific churches, of mothers and fathers of Christian communities, of congregation members representing some 80% of the almost 15 million Pacific people of the planet. People who are custodians of the majority of the Pacific Ocean, which is one of the lungs of this planet. A deep spirituality permeates the communities of the Pacific and is at the heart of the Pacific people's relationship with each other and with the environment. Spirituality is central to the way we interpret and understand and interact with one another and with the natural world. It shapes our indigenous knowledge into wisdom and guides us to act with gentleness and gratitude for the abundance that surrounds us. This spirituality is enhanced by Christianity and the many faith traditions of the world which have grown roots in our diverse Pacific communities. These faith traditions are shared with the vast majority of those who share this planet, including you here today. Our Pacific spirituality calls us to embody a profound respect for creation as an interconnected web of life, as for us to live as a caring and resilient community and valuing well-being above profit. It calls us to be custodians of God's household in the Pacific. It calls us to be guardians of the blue Pacific. The reflections and discernment and life-affirming responses of such spirituality remain critically important as scientific and political conversations in response to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, in response to the ongoing climate crisis, the health and vitality of the ocean which binds us together into a liquid continent and nurtures and breathes life into this planet, and to a unsustainable development that is rooted in the ideology of scarcity, valued in economic terms and is extractive by nature and threatens highlands, coasts, and the deep blue sea. Our indigenous spirituality acknowledged the wisdom of our ancients who read the stars and traveled across our mighty ocean in their giant canoes millennia before European discovery and conquest, considered themselves part of the ecosystem, not above it. Our Pacific understanding of Christian faith affirms this ecological household by recognizing the sacred cords that bind us to the land, the sea, and the sky. We bury the umbilical cords of our newborn children with seedling trees so that they are rooted and connected to the ground. And this sacred relationship lived out in our communities is the key to protecting life in our common household of the whole planet. Climate change has reminded the world of the sad reality that economics no longer deals with the whole household, with the economic subsystem's impact on society as a whole and its sociological, ecological, and cultural context. The current focus on economics alone has led to the dangerous assumption that the household is only made up of one room. The Western model of development based on an ideology of domination and extraction has severed the sacred thread that connected economics, ecology, and morality with devastating consequences. This type of development denies that an ecosystem is a system whose elements interact with their surroundings, the ecological, social, intellectual, and spiritual context as a unit, the whole household. We of the Pacific, on the front line of climate change, bear testimony to the fact that what has been promoted as sustainable development is in practice anything but. It is a pleasure to return to Kyoto after 26 and a half years, which was 1 year before the Kyoto Protocol was signed. I recall that the Kyoto Protocol bound developed countries and placed a heavier burden on them under the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities, because it recognized that they are largely responsible for the current high levels of global greenhouse emissions in the atmosphere. Today, under the Paris Agreement, the cry for polluter pays echoes from those countries, such as mine, struggling to find adaptation and mitigation and address the loss of, or the issue of loss and damage of what is happening to our communities, the issues of justice. Our pastoral work as religious leaders and our relationship with the divine and the environment calls us to amplify both the groaning of creation and the cry of the most vulnerable, resonating from the depths of the oceans to the mountains which kiss the sky. We call the world to a new way, a new normal that honors the practice of our ancestors of living in harmony and not exploiting nature, our sister and brother creation. We echo the call of His Holiness Pope Francis for an ecological conversion that brings us into further solidarity with our human and non-human family. In our household of God in the Pacific, among Pacific churches, this has been described as reweaving the ecological mat, to renew and strengthen the sacred chords of ecology, economics, and ecumenicity, which we believe is the key to protecting life in our common household. Resolving the climate crisis is dependent on the ethics and value systems that govern our relationships with the environment and also with each other. If there is bad political governance and a lack of social justice, these consequences can be seen in how the community treats its lands, its seas, its rivers, forests, and marine life. Conversely, if the significant contribution the natural environment provides for the community's well-being is appreciated, this is reflected in how the community governs itself, shares its resources, and dispenses justice. And we believe that the changing of the narrative of development and reweaving it into one that is truly ecological is the key to not only our surviving the climate crisis, surviving the social and economic crises in our region and across the planet, but also the key for us to flourish as one household. As religious leaders, we must commit to deepening our efforts to bring about a change of heart among members of our traditions in the way we relate to the earth and other people. We must commit to encouraging our educational and cultural institutions to strengthen and prioritize ecological education, participating actively in the public discourse on environmental issues, engaging our congregations and institutions with their neighbors to build sustainable, resilient, and just communities. We must commit to emphasizing the importance of reducing carbon emissions. Commit to encouraging our communities to embrace sustainable lifestyles. Commit to striving to align our financial investments with environmentally and socially responsible standards, and commit to evaluating the goods we purchase and the services we hire with the same ethical lens. The faith communities that I serve have already begun to prepare for the worst, the eventual forced relocation of our low-lying atoll countries and the spiritual, social, and cultural trauma they will have to endure as a result. And this is where our moral call comes from, the suffering of the planet and suffering of people. Pacific churches are supporting a call for an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on climate change and human rights. And we support a call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty and for ecocide to be recognized at the International Criminal Court. This cross that I wear today is not just a symbol of my faith. While the cross stands for love, justice, life over death, forgiveness, redemption, hope, and so much more, in particular, this cross is a reminder of the power of vulnerability. This cross was made by shells collected by children from the islands of Kiribati, my wife's family. This cross was made in a place at risk of extreme weather, experiencing king tides which wash over entire parts of the islands, where saltwater inundation renders agriculture almost impossible, and where rising seas push people to be permanently separated from their sacred land. This cross reminds me every day that current and future generations depend on us. And so I urge us to not stop working, not stop praying, not stop calling for justice for creation, and to use our collective energy, which we in the Pacific call mana, to bring about the global transformation that places biodiversity at the center of development, that affirms spirituality, indigenous knowledge, and praxis on living in harmony with nature, with the environment, with all places, and puts well-being of all ahead of profit for only a few. Let us pray for not only wisdom, but personal and political courage for those who must make commitments and keep those commitments to achieving 1.5 degrees net zero carbon emissions, for climate financing to assist the most vulnerable who are the least culpable. Thank you for your attention, and may God bless you.
Bagwan 先生、ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Reverend Bagwan. In the waiting room, the human beings do not possess nature and environment. The truth is vice versa. The nature and environment actually possesses human being. And so the baby was born, baby's umbilical cord was buried with the seedling. That's what Reverend Bagwan mentioned. That is the interconnectedness of life. It's only existing in the form of knowledge. Of course, people have to know it, but through experience, they experience the interconnected web of life. In Fiji and the Pacific Island nations are already preparing for the worst-case scenario. It is a very pressing needs, and the Reverend Bagwan made a very specific, concrete proposal. I thank you very much indeed.
それでは続きまして。
The next presentation will be by Professor Takemura. Professor, please. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Makio Takemura. Well, I do not belong to any religious school, but I have learned Buddhism widely and rather shallowly, but from my experience, I would like to make a presentation, including my proposal. Now, environmental issue, particularly the climate change, are significantly impacting the Earth and the inhabitants, including humankind, animals, and plants without doubt. To address these environmental issues, we must seriously take various approaches, including 1. Advance science and technology. For example, developing energy-efficient and non-polluting technologies. 2. Change the social system and transformation into a circular society. 3. Change our lifestyles, controlling human desires at the behavior level. And 4, establish appropriate views of humanity and the world, like awareness of our goal in life at thought level. When we focus on the climate change, the key is to reduce the CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions. The industries around the world are racing to develop the use of hydrogen energy, for example. Such technological innovations could potentially bring about dramatic effects. Therefore, to address the environmental problems, we must take all the approaches I have just mentioned comprehensively. Last year, Pope Francis published an encyclical called Laudato Si, and stated from a Christian perspective that we must address the environmental problems seriously. He emphasized the need to take a comprehensive approach involving scientific and technological means. I was deeply impressed and agree with his view. What are the duties of religious leaders in this context? Religious leaders, who also serve as scientists or politicians, should seek solutions to environmental problems in their professional domains. Now, what about clergy who are dedicated to religious activities and the general public of faith? And what can they do for the environment in their religious lives? I would like to discuss this matter from a Buddhist perspective. First, we must have a definite view of the world concerning oneself and the global environment and share it with others, at least of the same faith, and further with the general public. Since ancient times, Buddhists have believed that individual persons, in other words, body and mind, and the surrounding world are one and inseparable. The living is called shoho and the environment is called eho, and combined esho huni, meaning they are not two or one. In accordance with Yuishiki Shiso, the doctrine of consciousness, our body and mind and the environment exist only in the deepest part of human mind, called arayashiki. In other words, the environment is part of oneself. We must first recognize that our body and mind are unified with the environment, and together they make up our self. Thus, if we harm the environment, we harm ourselves. When understanding this well, we will naturally be motivated to protect and preserve the sound environmental world. Next, Buddhists call this world where we live Shaba, or corrupt world. It means that people have to endure suffering in this world. This world is also called Edo, which means impure world. However, some say that this world is actually Jodo, or the pure land of Buddha. The Lotus Sutra states that Vulture Peak Holy Eagle in India belongs to the land of Shakyamuni Buddha, who reached enlightenment long before his birth. The Tendai School of Buddhism in Japan coined the phrase, as Reverend Sonoda mentioned earlier, Somoku Kokudo Shikkai Jobutsu, based on its tenet. It means that grasses, trees, stones, and rocks have already attained Buddhahood, not that they may potentially attain it, meaning that all things inherently possesses the Buddha nature. This world being as a land intrinsically belonging to Buddha, how can we destroy it or damage it? If we deeply understand the meaning of the self and the environment based on this Buddhist view of the world, we will naturally seek our ways of life in line with this understanding. Next, we need to thoroughly review the way of life, what Buddhists are expected to follow, and live up to this way in the contemporary society. The Buddhist way of life is defined by Buddhist precepts and commandments, but in Japan somehow few people pay sufficient attention to them. The commandments must be observed by monks in their communities for aesthetic training, so they are heteronomous in nature. The precepts have an autonomous nature. When people establish their faith in Buddhism, they choose to live with them. As Daijokai or Bodhisattva to observe, Saicho, the founder of Tendai school, taught the Brahmacharya Sutta. It stipulates 10 major precepts and 48 minor precepts. So if we review them, we'll find a way of life conducive to resolving environmental problems. The Mahayana Buddhism has a text titled Yogashijiron, which stipulates Sanju Jokai, or the 3 precepts of Bodhisattvas. The 3 precepts are Shoritsu Gikai, Shozen Bokai, and Shoshu Jokai, each meaning to avoid evil deeds, to perform good deeds, and to benefit others. Now, what are the evil and the virtue? They are defined as follows. The virtue, the Sanju Jokai, is to avoid evil deeds, to perform good deeds, and to benefit others. What are the evil and the virtue? Excuse me. Now, they are defined as follows. The virtue benefits both oneself and others in the 2 worlds. The 2 worlds means this world and the afterworld. The evil hurt and harm both oneself and others in the 2 worlds. So our behaviors are considered to impact not only ourselves but also others in both this world and the world after death. In particular, evil deeds hurt oneself and others against the wishes of life, not only in this world, but also in the future world. We cannot harm others, not to mention ourselves, since we cannot bear to see others being hurt. Mr. Terashima talked about the power of empathy. The early days of Mahayana Buddhism adopted the Juzen Godo, or the 10 Commandments. It prohibits killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, insulting others, gossiping, causing disputes, greedy, angry, and false views. On the other hand, the 10 evil deeds are to commit all of them. The evil deeds give negative impact not only to other people, but also to the environment, especially true of being greedy, taking life, and holding false views. By avoiding evil deeds and engaging in good deeds, we can benefit other people of both present and future generations. The 3 precepts for bodhisattvas teaches to avoid the evil and engage in the virtue, plus, as an important feature, teaches to act to benefit others. Saicho valued the implementation of Mokorita, selfless devotion to serve others. In the virtues of Mahayana bodhisattvas, there are 4 infinite minds known as Shimuryo-shin. They are benevolence, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. Buddhists must enhance them to the infinite level. Benevolence is to wish for others' happiness. Compassion is a desire to relieve others from suffering. And empathetic joy means to congratulate others who have achieved a calm and peaceful mind. And equanimity means not to discriminate against anyone. These minds are the fundamental virtues that Buddhists must have. Buddhists can lead an ideal lifestyle by observing these precepts and commandments. Buddhists must be fully aware of this and act accordingly and promote this lifestyle among others. This is a responsibility for Buddhists. The norm for behavior is the empathy and compassion for others, not bearing to give suffering to others, and a wish to relieve other people from pain and suffering. It should not be heteronomous to feel obliged to do what is right. Buddhists should be autonomously motivated by their sense of compassion. While the environmental problems should be addressed based on intergenerational ethics, the grounds of these ethics should be compassion for future generations or determination not to cause suffering to them. Now, by applying this concept to the contemporary social situations, we can find a practical lifestyle for us. With regards to climate change, we should choose actions to avoid increasing of reducing greenhouse gas emissions as much as possible. Many practical behaviors are proposed in books and websites, so I will not go into details today. But the most basic is shoyoku chisoku, or being satisfied with only a few things. In Japan today, I am particularly concerned about the flood of excessive desire for food. On TV, food programs and big eater shows are broadcasted almost daily without feeling guilty. A huge amount of energy is needed to transport food over a long distance, and disposing or still edible food through combustion leads to CO2 emissions. In Japan, many companies set SDGs as their goals and are working to achieve them. But the TV industry prioritizes the race for higher audience ratings, and regrettably, they do not pay sufficient attention to either global society or our modest lifestyle in the traditional Japanese culture. Eating meat or beef is related to the methane gas emission, and also consumption of corn, and giving a negative impact to the environment. Well, lastly, I would like to introduce the lifestyle proposed by Arne Ness, who advocates deep ecology. He suggests use simple means, practice anti-consumerism, try to satisfy vital needs rather than desires, and seek depth and richness of experience rather than intensity. And I am impressed by all of them. And in addition, number 11, care the situation of developing nations and attempt to avoid a standard of living too much higher than that of the needy. And you aim to achieve a global solidarity of lifestyle. This is proposed by him, and I regard this as particularly important. Well, although I was not able to explain my view thoroughly due to limited time, but I would like to conclude my presentation. And thank you very much for your kind attention. Professor Takemura, thank you very much for your presentation. Well, in our lifestyle in Japan, I recognize that level of our living is very high. And we may deprive of something without noticing it, and also giving some impact of the generations, not only today and of the future. As Professor Takemura pointed out, we have to care. We cannot bear to see others being hurt in the future. I mean, we have to recognize and keep this in our mind and review our behavior in our daily lives. Thank you very much, Professor Takemura.
最後のご発
Now, moving on to the last speaker, Professor Desmond Kaiho. Floor is yours.
And may I publicly thank you for the many years of service you have given to Religions for Peace. Honourable and esteemed religious leaders, dear sisters and brothers of faith and compassion, may I begin by thanking you for honouring me for this invitation to speak as the recently elected moderator of Religions for Peace Asia. I bring to this religious summit the greetings of Religions for Peace Asia and its 22 member nations, representing 52% of the world's population. I also bring the greetings of Australia to the Japanese people still suffering from the assassination of your former Prime Minister. Shinzo Abe was close to Australia and we valued his friendship. I also bring my own greetings, and my reflections today are based on my training in theology and religion at the Pontifical Urban University in Rome, and then in my own subsequent studies in psychology, sociology, and linguistics. We stand and will stand this afternoon on Mount Hiei, the holy mountain of Japanese Buddhism. Most religions have sacred mountains, such as Mount Sinai, Mount Putuo, Mount Kailash, and Uluru, the great rock mountain in my own country, right in the center of the world's oldest continent, a great monument and sacred place for our first peoples. Our world, the whole universe, is a gift, a blessing, and a responsibility that we have not only for the natural environment, but also for the built environment. If most religions have their holy mountains, most faith traditions also have their holy cities. Medina and Mecca for Muslims, Jerusalem for Jews and Christians, Rome for Catholic Christians, Lhasa for Tibetan Buddhism, Amritsar for the Sikhs, and Varanasi, which has a central place in pilgrimage, death, and mourning in the Hindu world. Now, we have megacities, cities with more than 10 million people, and megalopolises, which are my focus today. In 2007, the world's urban population surpassed those living in rural areas. And by now, 55% are living in cities, even though they occupy only 3% of the land mass. The United Nations estimates that by 2050, 68% of the world's populations will be living in cities. Amongst the UN's list of megacities, only China and Japan have 2 cities in the top 10, Shanghai and Beijing, Tokyo and Osaka. By 2030, there will be 29 megacities in the Asia-Pacific region and 19 in the rest of the world. As we know, megacities are hubs for business and economic activity, as centers for innovation and productivity. But religion is also a living part of every city, shaping and being shaped by the urban context and in the use of public sacred spaces and sacred rituals for life's more important moments, to mourn, to celebrate, to remember, to reflect, and to help others, especially the poor, the sick, and the homeless. Cities are dotted, often close to their centers, with sacred places of worship. Temples, churches, mosques, synagogues, gurdwaras, and so on. But megacities, however, are being heavily impacted by climate adversity, including natural disasters, drought, food insecurity, extreme temperatures. They consume food and energy. They impact on air quality with chemical pollutants, trace gases, and aerosols with carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, ammonia, sulfur dioxide, and black and organic carbon. And they produce waste, mountains and mountains of waste in solid, liquid, and gaseous form. As religious leaders, we must accept the science of climate change in all its complexities. Our megacities are in danger, grave danger, if climate change is not addressed, motivated by the consistent religious teaching by all faiths that we must respect and take care of the environment by the Lord God, the Lord Buddha, and so on. We must be innovative and educate our communities and the wider community of the necessity to address climate change in all its facets. We could firstly begin with our own places of worship and religious buildings by transforming their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems through proper insulation and sealing and vapor barriers, sealing cracks, and planting trees and shrubs in urban gardens, internal green ferneries, and rooftop gardens in our megacities. Sacred people, sacred plants, sacred places, drawing on clean, renewable sources of energy, including solar panels and wind turbines. Beyond this, we religious leaders have a wider responsibility to advocate for change for our city context. Know our megacities' weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions and be aware of our cities' carbon footprints. Plant more trees and shrubs in our urban context, not least with rooftop gardens. Use energy efficiently. Go beyond petrol and diesel-driven cars, buses, and trucks. Build seawalls, surge barriers, and flood-resistant buildings. Encourage land recovery and restoration. Move communities from low-lying areas. Reuse disused urban spaces. And finally, ban plastic. Waste is an important issue. We must move from a straight line or linear economy of producing, using, and discarding to a circular economy governed by the philosophy of reduction, reuse, and recycling of waste. Religion and religious leaders are an untapped resource in protecting cities, especially in creating a moral and religious framework for protecting the earth and forging a new future in our megacities. Coastal cities are especially in danger, not just from climate change, but from land subsidence and accelerated urbanization. The cities said to be most at risk are Jakarta, Lagos, Houston, Dakar, Venice, Bangkok, Rotterdam, Miami, and Alexandria in Egypt. But there are others, including Osaka. They are at risk from sea level rises, storm surges, and high tides. For all cities, water management must become a priority. Not only are our cities to become green cities, they must all become blue cities, where water is managed effectively. A blue city is where there is an integrated management of water able to address the risks of too much, too little, and too polluted water. Finally, today we live in a world of greater risk, limited controllability, and uncertain predictability. Global megacities are the hubs or nodes in the process of combating climate change. His All Holiness Bartholomew, Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, who is known as the Green Patriarch, has said, "We use the Greek word kairos, to describe a critical moment in time, often a specific historical period with lasting repercussions and eternal significance. For humankind and the planet as a whole, now is the kairos, the decisive time in our relationship with all of God's creation, when we must respond in an opportune manner to protect life on earth from the worst consequences of human recklessness. May God grant us the wisdom to act promptly." Thank you.
カーヒル先生、ありがとうございます。
Dr. Cahill, thank you very much for your lecture. The megacity is a somewhat different perspective from other speakers. The danger of megacity itself and the environmental load given to the global environment by megacity, and very practical suggestions were proposed, inclusive of reducing of the waste. And the last proposition is a kairos, the decisive moment in the history that we are living in that kairos to act and to change. And we have to consider the real practice to change our behavior. Thank you very much, Professor David Cahill.
Well, we don't have much time left, but we have 6 to 7 minutes still. So as time permits, I would like to invite panelists to raise questions or comments to the other panelists. Any panelists, any comment or questions to the presentations made by the other panelists? Then Professor Sonoda. His time is limited. And thank you for giving me time to raise questions. The presentations of the other panelists were made as a Shintoist. I was very much impressed. Is something Reverend James Bhagwan has mentioned. In the previous Reverend Bhagwan's presentation, he said Ningen, a human being and other elements of nature, plants and animals are one, interconnected. And he explained the situation of the spiritual lives of every being in the space. The spiritual life that I mentioned encompasses not only human being, but every being on the planet. That's how I understood. And at the same time, the Reverend Bhagwan stated, Reverend Bhagwan is a priest in Christianity. So I would like to ask you this point, including in relation to Christianity, but more with respect to in your PCC, organization PCC, I believe there is a shared common understanding, I believe. But in broader term, in Europe and Americas, the people in Christianity think earth, plants, and animals' lives. Do you think the Christian people in Europe and Americas actually take all those beings as a spiritual life? How much do you think the Christians in those Western continents have the shared understanding as yours, like a spiritual life, interconnected web of lives? Reverend Bhagwan, would you like to comment on the question?
For the question. I think we have started to see some major shifts within the Christian faith, and particularly when we had the encyclical by Pope Francis, Laudato Si, which was a galvanizing moment for the church worldwide, for Christians worldwide, not just for the Catholic community. But what we have done in the Pacific is the process of decolonizing our faith, because we are colonized people. And that is something perhaps we have to think about. We cannot just think about the spiritual without the ecological and without the political aspects also of the impact of our faith. And so I think what was shared by some of the other speakers today, particularly on consumerism, is the biggest challenge that we face. And as I reflect on your question and reflect on what was shared, I think also by Professor Takemura, the fact that our adherents to our spiritualities, to our faith traditions, are also consumers of media. And how do we engage in that? Because that is the most pervasive thing in the world today, what is coming through not just television, but also on our smartphones. And that is directly challenging the solutions that we are presenting through our faith. So we really need to engage in that thinking. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。カールさん、どうぞお願いします。
Thank you. Professor Carl, please.
James's comment, but in a different context. I think that across the Western world, religious leaders have been giving leadership on this matter. Laudato Si is obviously one example, the Green Patriarch that I mentioned. And this has been having its impact on communities. But I think there needs to be more concrete action. Firstly, as I said, with regard to our own places of worship, and that has a ripple effect. But then to take on board all the suggestions. So there does have to be a further change in mind by our religious leaders to become more practical. Now, associated with this, and in a somewhat different context from the Pacific, I think certainly in my own country of Australia, the indigenous peoples, the Aborigines, are also having a big impact. And there's going to be changes in that with the election of our new government. The Christianity has been somewhat advanced, more the Protestant than the Catholic, to be honest, on engaging with Aboriginal spiritualities. And they have a central, and there are many Aboriginal spiritualities, but one of the key concepts they have is what some of them call dadiri, deep spiritual listening to the other. And that we must continue. And we must also draw on the experiences of our Aboriginal peoples. For example, in Australia, we have a major problem with bushfires, wildfires, as the Americans say. And the worst one was in early 2009, when in my city of Melbourne, we had 3 successive days of 49 degrees centigrade, 46 degrees centigrade. And bushfires sprung up all over our state, and almost 200 people died in those fires. And because we had not followed the Aboriginal practice of burning the land, they would do it periodically so as to clear the undergrowth, which builds up and increases the temperature of a bushfire, and also allows the animals, the kangaroos and the wallabies and so on, to be able to go through the bush. Now we're starting to adopt that particular practice, and we're being guided by Indigenous leaders. So I think that's another important component to our thinking, which is also happening, as James has told us, in the Pacific Island nations. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。園田先生がです。
Thank you very much. Reverend Sonoda mentioned the Christianity and the Western society in terms of spirituality. I'm so sorry to say that, I have to say that, but we have to finish the panel discussions. As manifested in the questions, there are a number of the bushfire, wildfires in lots of parts of the world. The environment, we learn, has a connectedness with the human being, and we actually share the environment. And also the wisdom of the whole, as Professor Terashima mentioned, has to be taken into consideration. In the preparation process of Conference of Party 26, one scientist mentioned this. Scientists can study and analyze and gives warning, but the scientists cannot change the behavior of the people. Only religious people can change how people behave. We have to really, on the basis of knowledge, have to act, and we have to provide how the way of living can be changed to the ordinary people. This is the strength of the religion. Thank you very much indeed. And the distinguished panelists, thank you very much. Then I would like to turn the microphone to Reverend Wada.
So the mic has been transferred from the coordinator, Reverend Wada, to MC Wada. Thank you very much, all the panelists, distinguished panelists, for your great discussions. Another round of applause again. Now, in the opening ceremony during the morning, we had the commemorative lecture and a symposium. We heard valuable comments and proposals from each speaker. And we, the religious leaders, when we receive something, we have to repay back through actions and practice and execution. And through today's program, I really feel the importance of these actions. So now, ladies and gentlemen in the hall and the audience and the viewers of YouTube, please be combined with the religious leaders around the world to perform the duties of the religion. I hope truly that this will lead to the peace of the world. With this, I would like to conclude today's program. The 35th the Interreligious Gathering of Prayer for World Peace in the 35th anniversary of the Religious Summit meeting of Mount Hiei. And this concludes all the programs in the opening ceremony. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation in the audience and also the audience of YouTube live broadcasting. Thank you very much for staying with us.